Bernard, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself there and join us in this conversation? I know I saw you on earlier. There you are. Be sure to unmute yourself, Bernard. You may need to, maybe we can do that for you. There you are.
Yeah.
It's great to have you with us.
He knows
Bernard.
how to
Say a bit
unmute
about
himself.
anything you want, but those early workshops maybe that back in April and their impact on you and how you got involved with Reverend Lawson.
Well, before I start, I wanted to ask you, would there be a problem if Jim Lawson just simply talk on the telephone?
We're trying to arrange that, and he's having trouble even doing that. I'm not quite sure why. We're baffled. We're not sure why, but we're trying to do that right now.
Well, what you can do is just dial your number, and you can put your phone next to the microphone.
I think that's low tech. We could do that. Let me try about that. You talk a little, see if we can do that as something as a way to do this.
Yes, we could do that.
Can-do movement.
Okay. That's where we used to do it in Nashville. We had someone who always stayed next to the telephone on the street in case if someone got injured. So we used to using the telephone as a way of, part of the movement. Okay? That was part of the whole strategy with the movement, and that is to use the telephone. That's how we organized mass meetings in Nashville. There was a lady who couldn't go to the meetings because she was handicapped and homebound, but her job was to simply call on the telephone 10 people who then actually called 10 other people, and those 10 people called 10 people, so it's called a telephone tree. And as a result of that, she was able to mobilize a mass meeting in 1 hour. Then she'd stay on the talk show, and she kept waiting and dialing until she got in, and then she would, instead of asking the question of the host on the telephone, she would say, there'll be a mass meeting at 6 o'clock at First Baptist Church tonight. Those days, they didn't have any delays, and, So those are strategies that we use to organize. And Jim Lawson was the person who trained all of us. That is Marion Barry, who ended up being the mayor of Washington, D.C. Okay. There were Meharry students, and these were doctors, medical students. Now, we wouldn't allow them to go to jail because we didn't want any of our future surgeons and doctors to miss any classes. They needed all the classes they could get. Now, the preachers, we wanted all of them to go to jail, okay? That's what we're going to be preaching about, So they had the actual experience. But Jim Lawson was the key to turning my life in the direction which I wanted to go. When I was a little boy in Tampa, Florida, back in the day, I had an incident on a trolley car where my grandmother and I were catching the trolley car. In those days, you had to put your money in the front next to the conductor, and then you had to get off and then walk to the back on the street to the back door. Well, we were running after we put our money in there because I wanted to jump on the steps to hold the door open. And they, the driver took off because my grandmother fell. But I said to myself in that time that when I get grown, I'm going to do something about this problem. So it was when I was at the American Baptist College there, and John Lewis was my roommate. He tried to get me to go to these workshops. Then put work in there, and I've been okay. On workshops. I said, man, I got enough work to do already. I was janitor on the second floor, assistant librarian, and also I used to wash the dishes, the pots, in our cafeteria. And the reason I did that is because I could drink the pot liquor from the collard greens. So I volunteered to do that. So I said, okay, I'll go, since John Lewis kept aggravating me. And when I got to that workshop, here's what happened. Lawson was able to connect. I mean, like these Baptist preachers, he was Methodist, of course, but he was able to get us to understand how we could put the scriptures that we learned together with social action. And we always saw that as something political and separate. But he was able to bring, these scriptures and the gospel into a movement for social change. And that gave a good foundation, especially for preachers. That's why it was no coincidence that you had so many preachers coming out of the movement, because he was able to do that and put love into action instead of just in your mouth. How do you take love and put it into action? I was the one that was with Jim Lawson when he was practical. We had people who brought up the rear when we were marching from downtown demonstrations. And I was with Jim, the two of us, Jim Lawson. And you know what? These white gang members, like you saw, at Capitol, came up and one of them got close enough to spit on Jim Lawson. I was there. And, I had to learn how to respond to that. Somebody would come up and spit on you. You know what Jim Lawson did? Witness. Jim Lawson asked the fellow who spat on him for a handkerchief.
My God.
And the fellow just reached in his pocket and gave him the handkerchief. And Jim Lawson wiped the spit off him himself and gave him back. And they started talking about the hot rod, and how many cylinders it had and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know anything about hot rods, so I couldn't even. But he knows about that. Lawson knows a lot of things. Martial art, by the way, is one of the areas that he's an expert in. Yeah. So my point is what you do with the knowledge that you have. This fellow walked on, got so excited, the rest of his gang members left, and he was still walking with us all the way to the church. And he looked up and he saw he was at the church because he was so engulfed in this conversation. Because Lawson has a way of engaging people, getting people to think, not just with their mouths. Some folks can get folks to talk, but not, engage. He had him so engaged. I remember the fellow, he had a black leather jacket on, and his name was Danny. So his name was on it. And then he looked up and saw the church. He said, I got to go now. But all of the demonstrations we had since then, we never saw Danny again. So Jim Lawson transformed him by an act of violence on that person's part. Jim Lawson took it and turned it around. Okay? So I witnessed that. So I know. I learned from practical experience from him. And remember, Jim Lawson was arrested at the church, in Nashville, because he was teaching us, Yeah, they call it civil disobedience. It meant that you were breaking the law for them. So he was arrested then. But I've taken what I've learned from Jim Lawson all over the world. Yes. And there is no single person who had as much influence over the teachings. That's what I do now. AVP, Alternatives to Violence Project. Yeah, it started in Greenhaven, New York, upstate New York, Greenhaven Prison. It is now in over 60 countries around the world. Yes. And Lawson was my teacher, and I learned so much from him. And the reason he is able to teach the way he does, you know how he teaches? Interrogatives. He gets you to think. He doesn't tell us what to do. Like the first sit-in we had in Nashville was not a protest. It was a test. We simply went down, sat in to see how the people would react. Then, you know what we would do? We would return to the church and have what we call social drama. Yeah, role play. We would sit on a chair, stool, and then some of us, the other of us, would then just knock the chair down and push people over and call them names and all that kind of thing. There's film footage on that, Nashville City Movement. And what was going on? He was helping us develop our emotional strength. Yeah, you can be intellectual, you can be physical, but the point is, can you control your emotions? So we were practicing how to control our emotions when we got into those situations. It was called boot camp in the military. Okay? You go and you practice this, and so when something goes off like a bomb or whatever, you don't panic and run and your emotion lose it. It was keeping yourself together under those circumstances. It's like asking for a handkerchief from the person who spits on you. That's
Bernard,
power.
Bernard, that you make reference to that story that David Halberstam tells in The Children about you, and you're involved in that incident where you're headed to a sit-in, one of the early ones, and some people have been knocked down to the ground, and Reverend Lawson shows up. You're there in the story, and someone spits on him, and he turns to the man and asks him, "Does he have a handkerchief?" And then he wipes the spittle off his face, and then he looks at the man and sees he's wearing a motorcycle jacket, and he says, "Oh, do you motorcycle or hot rod or what?" And he began to have a conversation with this man who had just spit on him, and completely changed the dynamic by treating this person who had spit on him and cursed at him as a human being. It's a powerful, powerful story. And as you mentioned, that incident, that may be the one you're referring to, or there may have been other times like that also. But that story, when I read it years ago, it stuck with me. I think about it regularly.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Yes, you were indeed there, as I heard the story told. I think you've been knocked down to the ground, maybe even someone said, or someone had been. Anyway, it's a powerful story, and I appreciate you evoking it.
Yeah.
It looks like we're not going to be able to get him on. And if we look at our watches, we see that the time allotted here is we have a few minutes left. And I thought we will try to reschedule a time. And we had checked his computer, had a rehearsal on Monday, and everything worked fine. He called me this evening, said he was having trouble with his computer. And we've been working with him for over an hour trying to get it to work. And for some reason, it just never was able to work. I don't want to, you don't really understand what happened. And we're disappointed. And so we apologize for that. We did practice as best we could on it. But I tell you, these stories have been great. And I see notes and comments in chat about the reflections, and people didn't get to know they were going to hear from Bernard Lafayette and Taylor Branch tonight instead of James Lawson. Why don't we take just a couple of minutes before we go? And if you all have something you want to add, you can. But we also had a couple of other people who are lined up just to make some comments of appreciation about Reverend Lawson. Again, what you're seeing now is the surprise portion of the evening. We were going to spring all these people on Reverend Lawson after he was finished as a way of honoring him. So you got to hear the dessert first here. But we have a couple of others who are going to just have brief comments, and I want to invite them to do that. And we'll draw to a close here in a few minutes, and then we will, of course, try to reschedule and double test everything. And I wanted to invite, you heard from Joe Daniels earlier. We have another Joe Daniels here. This is Joe Daniels' son, Dr. Joe Daniels, and he has met Reverend Lawson and it's had an impact on him. I want to invite you, Joe, to just share your observation with us.
Absolutely. Just being a black man in America growing up, it was hard to always find superheroes in the mist. And I would say that James Lawson, Reverend Dr. James Lawson, is definitely a superhero that I add to my wall. Having the blessing of knowing him through family has been great. But I was actually able to meet Dr. Lawson about 3 years ago at my Aunt Elsie's funeral out in California. And he blessed me with the opportunity. I think the one thing for young people when they see icons is to be able to talk to them and share a moment. And oftentimes, like certain icons or certain people in the public sphere are always bombarded. And, and oftentimes it's, kind of a cold experience. But the one thing that has allowed him to maintain such a high level of influence is the fact that he shared in a conversation at a gravesite. And he took his time, he answered my questions, he spoke with me, and he challenged me. And I think that's the good thing, and that's the key of Dr. Lawson. Like, each and every experience he has as he's building community, as he's building relationships, he's always going to leave you with the challenge to go forward and continue to leave a legacy, continue to grow, continue to inspire. And so he gifted me with one of his books, and I have pieced through this book, each and every word of it. And it's been such a blessing just to know that he is not just an icon that I can read in books and watch on YouTube, but a man who's still walking and a man who leaves behind large footsteps. And as a leader in the Black community, especially out here in Northwest Arkansas, I'm happy to lead, but encouraged to know that I get to walk in his footsteps. So whenever I get to see him again, I just want to tell him always, thank you. I love him, and I love you for all that you do, Reverend Lawson, and continue to keep living and keep marching and allowing us to reclaim the democracy that we continue to strive to have here in this country. Also, shout out to Taylor Branch for providing me with all of his books and autographing them. And Reverend Lafayette, I have seen and read a lot about your stuff as well. And the one thing I want you to do tonight, if you could sing "Buses Are Coming" with your mouth closed, because I watched that on Eye on the Prize, and that touched me real good. And I've always tried to practice how to sing. Better get your toothbrush. Oh yeah.
He'll sing it all right.
You can take our toothbrush. Oh yeah. You can take our toothbrush. You can take our toothbrush. You can take our toothbrush. Oh yeah. That stuck with me, and I appreciate it for your tenacity, your grit. And I'm gonna end it there and just say thank you from a young man looking to make a difference in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple others I want to hear from just briefly, and then maybe a final comment from Bernard Lafayette and Taylor Branch. But Alicia Gale, who's a student in the community club that I mentioned earlier, is here, and we invited her as a kind of on behalf of the youngest generation here to just say a word about her appreciation for Reverend Lawson, her understanding of his work. So Alicia, glad to have you for your comment.
Hi. I actually had to write it down before I forgot what
So if I do glance down, I'm glancing at a paper. I'd like to say that to say Reverend Lawson did a lot for the Black community would be a gross understatement. He not only risked his own livelihood for equality amongst all, he encouraged others to stand for what they believed in. When I was offered the opportunity to speak here today to you all, I immediately accepted, as I was overjoyed to just be able to speak to such an influential figure and about such an influential figure. Reverend Lawson greatly inspired myself, and I'm sure many others of my generation, to get involved in issues facing the Black community. Well, I had another part, but since he's not here, I can't really say it, but I'd just like to say, if he happens to pop in, thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Great to have your comment. And the fifth person we'd invited to make some comments of appreciation, someone else a lot of people in the D.C. area know, Reverend William Lamar of Metropolitan AME. Not only is he pastor of Metropolitan AME, but he's co-chair of Washington Interfaith Network, which is a congregation-based direct organizing that draws its lineage back from the civil rights movement. And so, Bill, glad to have you with us. If you make just an observation of your appreciation of Reverend Lawson and his work.
Theo, thank you. I was taught and I read early on that when you are in the presence of elders and giants, you listen. And so it's been a pleasure to eavesdrop, to hear Brother Lafayette, to hear Brother Branch, to be in the presence of one of the founders of our organization and my friend and mentor, Joe Daniels. I simply want to say that the work that you all that you began and continue is what inspires us to agitate, to organize, to be more than advocates, but to build the power to change policy and to change systems. And so we want to thank you all for your work. We want to definitely honor Reverend Lawson. And I want to encourage all of you who are listening to join with the Washington Interfaith Network, to not just celebrate the history, but to know that we have a future to forge together. So join with us as we make Washington what it can and ought to be. Again, I'm honored to be in your presence.
Thank you so much, Bill. We do want to draw to a close in a minute. We will, as I said, we'll try to reschedule this program. Maybe we'll invite some of these other guests back also, and we'll see, maybe with a little different format next time. But delighted to have you here. And Bernard, you have another word or another final story you want to share before we close? We're so glad you're here. We're sorry you didn't get to see Reverend Lawson, but we're working on it. Maybe next time. But delighted to have you and your comments. If you want to add a final thought.
My final thought is this. We've got to institutionalize nonviolence, where it's taught in universities and colleges. There ought to be a Saturday nonviolent workshop at churches. We've got to be able to use what we have learned and be able to share that. That's the only way that we can be able to make a difference. So I just want to, because of the sake of our time, just to simply say that. Now, if you insist that I sing, I don't mind. But let us hear from some others. Okay?
Thank you so much. And Taylor, you have a final comment? I just also want to say, speaking of singing, I think we'll refrain, but it's Taylor Branch's birthday. And we doubly appreciate him being with us today and giving us time on his birthday night. But if you want to just offer another comment, Taylor, it'd be great.
My only comment is I really hope you can reschedule to have Jim on so that these people, all of these people that we've been honored to have tuning in can actually experience it. I hope that happens. And I agree with Bernard. The way I would put it is we need to do something to make people realize how nonviolence is essential to our life. It's already part of it. there was violence in the Capitol, and everybody said that violates all of America. And yet, if you turn around and say, we are a system devoted to nonviolence, they look at you like it's odd. Because, so we need to change the way people think about the role of nonviolence in our institutions already, and how important, what a great miracle it is to be able to have votes when countries all around the world, still settle things with coups and that sort of thing. So I think the nonviolent mission is ahead of us, and it's both sacred and civic, and that's what makes Jim Lawson and Bernard and all of the people who've been architects of that movement so important.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Joe, if you have just a word, and then we'll ask Heather to offer a benediction for us, and we'll send you all an email about our future plans and an effort to reschedule here, see what we can do. And but this has been a blessing, and wonderful to hear some of the recollections and insights from you on the panel.
I just want to say what an honor and privilege it's been just to be here and to share with Heather, to share with Taylor Branch and Bernard Lafayette. What a history lesson Mr. Lafayette was giving all of us, just tremendous. And this whole call to institutionalize nonviolence, Lord have mercy. I'm going to get to work on that, sir. I'm going to get to work on that. And I believe a whole lot of folks who are listening are going to do the same thing. I think it's tremendous. And so keep doing what you're doing. I hope we can reschedule this, because I believe it's just going to be a powerful, powerful time. God bless you, and happy birthday, Taylor Branch.
Happy birthday.
Best to Kate.
All right, I was asked to do a benediction, but I'm going to cede my time to Reverend Lafayette so that we can close with your voice and your singing. I think you just muted yourself, Rep. There you go.
He's there.
Reverend Lafayette, the floor is yours.
Oh, so should I sing?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, all right. Music is the food for the soul, and that's how we know we got a movement. Martin Luther King looked at whether or not we were singing songs about our own experiences. That's when we knew we had a movement. Well, this song about buses are coming was made up when we on the Freedom Rides. We were in jail in Jackson, Mississippi, and on the third floor of the city jail, we could look down the highway and see the buses are coming. So we made up a song because we wanted the jailers to get ready. And I won't sing all the verses. I'll just sing a couple of them, but because of time. And so we struck out singing the song. Buses are a-coming, oh yes. Buses are a-coming, oh yes. Buses are a-coming, buses are a-coming. Buses are a-coming, oh yeah. And we told the jailers, better get you ready, oh yeah. And then what they did is say, all right, stop all that singing and hollering here. This is not a playhouse. This is a jailhouse. You're not supposed to be singing and being happy in jail. That's what the purpose of jail. Okay? So we kept singing, and so they said, all right, if you all keep on singing, what we're going to do is take those mattresses you got. And we made up a verse. You can take our mattress, oh yes. You can take our mattress, oh yes. You can take, and then we start piling up the mattress at the door and pushing them on out. We didn't want them anyway. You know why? They were just those little tiny mattresses. And two of us had to sleep on one mattress, end for end. The old people know what that means. One person's head this way, and the feet, the other person's feet that way, and then we got this imaginary line down the middle where you don't touch each other. Okay, so then we kept saying we got the mattress and piled them up and put them at the door and put them on out. Okay, and then what we realized is that when we were singing, we were already overcrowded, and we were going to be breathing on each other. So we learned how to sing with our mouths closed. Can you imagine that? Sing with your mouth closed? Yeah. And I'll just say this and I'll be through. You take your lips and you put your center of your lips together, no matter how big your lips are or how thin they are. You can still put the middle part together like that. Try it. Why don't you try to do that, okay? Yeah. You can take a mattress, oh yes. You can take a mattress, oh yes. You can take a mattress, you can take a mattress. We will keep our freedom, oh yeah. You have to learn how to sing even with your mouth closed.
Amen.
Why did I do that?
Amen.
Thanks be to God for Reverend Lafayette, Reverend Daniels, Mr. Taylor Branch, Reverend William Lamar, Alcia, Dr. Joe Daniels, and for our fearless tech team who worked and worked and worked. We will be back. Thank you.
Why?